everyone, and welcome to this video about how to prepare a flexible budget. Before I get into the scenario and working through how to actually develop this, I first want to talk about the difference between a static and flexible budget. More often than not, what you'll find in the workplace is that you will have a static budget, meaning that your finance, operations, and various different departments will get together. They'll take a look at various different pieces of data. Maybe they'll use previous information as a way of forecasting the future. Maybe they'll do some other sort of analysis in the marketplace to come up with what they think will be their production numbers, their sales volume, things like that. Based on those assumptions, then, all these different budgets will be put together. Now, more often than not, what you'll find in the workplace is that companies will use what is called a static budget, meaning that once they finalize what that budget is, those budget assumptions will be carried all year long. So if they assume a certain amount of production all year, even if conditions change, even if the economy changes, that budget is going to stay as it was built originally. However, as we all know, things can happen, economies can sour, or economies can go robust all of a sudden, and all your assumptions can be vastly different in actuality. So what can happen is you can have these huge variances that really don't have a bearing on anything other than an assumption was wrong from the beginning of your budgeting process. And let me give you an example. Some years ago, I was working in a manufacturing environment, and all of a sudden, gas prices started going through the roof. Another time, milk prices started going through the roof. Now, that is not something that the company could have anticipated. We don't have a crystal ball, and we don't see these things coming. So, at some point, with those gas prices and milk prices going haywire, we had these enormous variances. Now, to some extent, you can certainly explain it. It's, if you go into a budget meeting and you say, hey, milk prices are up this much, and, a large majority of this variance is because milk prices have gone off the table here, that is reasonable. However, one of the ways that we can actually mitigate those kinds of issues happening is that we can have a flexible budget. And what a flexible budget does is that it allows for different activity levels. So you can have different assumptions based on, okay, if all of a sudden we were thinking we were going to have X amount of production, but all of a sudden we have Y amount of production, you can actually build your budget based on these different assumptions. So you can actually have the ability to be able to minimize these variances over time. And what happens is, and the way that I've seen this work in companies where they've actually employed something like this, is I worked for someone one time who had a 6-month review process. And so they would take a look at their budget 6 months into the year, and if they had to make adjustments about activity levels or any other kind of assumptions, they would make those adjustments at that point in time. And there are more companies that do it that way. They actually will go in, make adjustments periodically. It might be once a quarter, once every 6 months, something like that. But at least it allows you to stay current in your budget assumptions. So let's take the following scenario, that we have a master budget where we have direct materials of $1,200, direct labor of $4,000, variable manufacturing overhead of $2,000, and fixed manufacturing overhead of $18,000, with our budget assumption, our master budget assumption being 6,000 units. Now, if we want to go to a flexible budget where we will create a flexible budget based on units of 5,000, 7,000, and 8,000, then we would do the following transactions in order to build that. So first of all, we have to come up with our per unit cost for each of the variable pieces. So direct materials is variable, direct labor is variable, and of course our variable manufacturing overhead is a variable piece. So we take the $1,200 and divide by the 6,000. That gives us 20 cents per unit. If we take the direct labor of 4,000, divide by the 6,000 units, we get 67 cents per unit. Variable manufacturing overhead is 2,000, divided by the 6,000, we get 33 cents per unit. Fixed manufacturing overhead, we do not do that calculation because it is a fixed amount. And as you can see, for all of our different production scenarios, 18,000 is a given total number. So fixed manufacturing overhead will be the same $18,000 for every production level that we want to consider as far as our flexible budget is concerned. So when we look at the 5,000 units and we build a flexible budget for 5,000 units, what we will do is we'll take that 20 cents that we just calculated, multiply it times the 5,000 units, and we get $1,000. The same for the 7,000 units. We take that times the 20 cents per unit, and our direct materials budget for the 7,000 units will be $1,400. So you see kind of the logic that we're building here, because as those production levels go up or down, we're multiplying by that per unit cost for each of those variable pieces. So for example, in the 5,000 unit scenario, we take the 67 cents, multiply it by the 5,000, and we get $3,333.33. So you get the idea. So each of those production levels will take that per unit rate times the quantity at whatever level it is, and we'll get our dollars. Then your total manufacturing costs, for example, in the 5,000 unit budget, you would be adding up the $1,000 plus the $3,333.33 plus the $1,666.67 and the $18,000, and that gives you $24,000 for total manufacturing costs for that production level. So in this scenario, if we started to see that we're in line with a $7,000 budget, then we would be comparing our actual numbers to the flexible budget of 7,000 units rather than our master budget, which was only at 6,000 units. So I hope that helps to explain how a flexible budget is built. And if you have any questions about that, please leave them below. I'll be happy to help. And I look forward to seeing you on another video.